Hope everyone can hear me. Thank you very much for giving up your time today to come and listen to what I've got to say for 25 minutes or so. If I don't waffle on too long, I'm more than happy to take questions at the end if anyone's got anything they want to ask. What I'm going to talk about is claims on products, what the regulations are, what you need to know, but more importantly, how to make it a real positive for your brand. I'll just give you a little bit of the outline of what I want to cover, which is a little bit about me, so you know who you're listening to, a little bit about why you might be doing some testing, some examples of claims, reasons that you might be testing, so what is your position that you're trying to take, and then what to think about when you're going to spend your money to do this. And then a few examples of things that we've been doing over the past year for clients that'll just maybe just give you some thought. So this is not a how to do your claim, because every product is different, every brand is different. It's really just to try and engage in the conversation. So me, I'm former president of the SCS. I worked for Unilever for 9 years, originally in oral product development, but mainly in skincare. And then for a good chunk, I was with Boots as skincare scientific advisor, and I ran the claims testing department there. I was involved in all the fun and games with Protect and Perfect. If anybody remembers those crazy days, I certainly do. It was that's the power of claims. An own brand that was trundling along, going nowhere, is now a world-leading brand. I've been working at Q-Test since 2015. But Q-Test is an awful lot older than that, coming up nearly 40 years now. It was founded by Professor Ronnie Marks, who some people may know, Professor of Dermatology at Cardiff University. He's the guy who developed a lot of the techniques that we all take for granted now. So things like the corneometer, the cutometer, we measure transepidermal water loss, we measure all these things. Ronnie Marks helped develop these back in the day, and Q-Test, unusually for a contract testing company, has published about 80 papers because we developed a lot of things that we all take for granted now. So we've got a huge history and expertise in the team for supporting claims for clients. We work with clients who are huge, do TV advertising. We work with brands just getting their first product developed, taking it from the kitchen through to the manufacturer, through to claims, onto the shelf. So we work with people of all sizes and everywhere around the world. So we've got a huge amount of experience of supporting people. So in terms of claims, when you're thinking about what is my audience for claims on the product, well, you've got two. You've got the consumer, who obviously wants to be confident that the product that they're buying from you, whether it's self-developed or from a major international brand, is safe. And it also delivers the promised benefits. We can all say whatever we want about a product, but how do people know that the product delivers this benefit? And that's what I want to cover a little bit about today. The regulatory authorities also want to know that your product is safe, and they also want to know that it delivers the promised benefits. So by meeting either of these expectations, you should meet both. And as I say, I'll talk through what some of the guidance is here in terms of what you need to do. But I also want to start thinking a little bit about, are you saying something interesting? Because this is what we love about what we do for clients. Are you differentiated from the brands on the shelf next to you? We get a lot of people who come to us and say, we want to do a moisturization study, for instance. And so it's why? What are you trying to say about your product? Is that the right test? Or are you just thinking you need to do a certain test to put a product on the market? Are you really thinking about how does that express your brand identity? How does that differentiate you from the people next to you? And then does the consumer get it? You can make a claim that just goes straight over people's heads, or is so technical or so meaningless that it wasn't worth making in the first place. So think about how you're going to communicate this. And do they really experience the benefits? Because having a really powerful claim on your product that nobody feels, sees, touches, experiences, believes, they're not going to buy it twice. You can sell it once by making a really strong claim about the product, but if you've got no real evidence that the consumer gets that benefit, then you're unlikely to buy another one, and they're going to flit across to the next product in Superdrug or Boots or wherever. So it's really important to think through not just the technical, but the consumer aspect of it. And these are the brands that we see really powerfully perform in the market when they think like this. Most motivational quotes on the internet are made up. This one is actually true. And I think he's absolutely right. You have to give people a reason not to forget about you. That's the hard bit. If you walk into any store, or if you're selling online or any other marketplace, there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of products that say similar things. But that doesn't mean that every year products don't rise to the top in this industry and become immensely powerful. People say to me that everything's been done. And it has in a way, but it hasn't, because there's always an opportunity for the right product in the right delivery, saying something interesting, saying something authentic. And that's where your communication, your claims is really powerful in terms of what you want to say to people. And you've got to think about this carefully. Are you just another product on the market? There are some rules. The regulators really are the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority, and if you don't, I would bookmark their adjudications page and I would read it all the time, because you'll learn an awful lot about the advertising regulations and what you can and can't say, because big companies and little companies get pulled up all the time. And it's not just cosmetics, of course. You know, you'll see BMW making claims about efficiency and they'll be hammered because you haven't got the data. But closer to home, Dove with their microbiome claim, they were told they simply didn't have the data to support their microbiome claim. And they had to go away with their tails between the legs, and it teaches you what they're actually looking for levels of claim. So it's I find that it's really valuable to look at that and look back at, just do a trawl of beauty companies if you don't routinely do this, and see what they got right and what they got wrong, and they'll tell you what evidence the advertising authorities are looking for. And remember, it only takes one member of the public or friend of a brand to put a request into the ASA about a product's claim, and they have to investigate it. I'm convinced 90% of them must be a brand's next door neighbour personally, but they have to investigate. Trading standards are much less active because they're way too busy to worry about that. And Clearcast, of course, pre-clear all advertising for TV. We work with a number of companies that put adverts on the television, but that's a small percentage of the market. But if you're looking to put anything on mainstream television advertising, you have to have it pre-cleared. So they look at your evidence before it goes on. The CAP Code of Practice tells you what you need to do. And this is all on the ASA website. So the broadcast and non-broadcast advertising rules, and that includes website, social media, Instagram. Absolutely anywhere you make a claim is now under the same regulations, which never used to be the case. People used to say all sorts of things online and then tone it down and pack. Well, as far as the advertising regulators are concerned, these are such powerful advertising channels now that they treat them all the same. Obviously, it's got to be legal. It's got to be decent, so you can't be saying inappropriate things. It's got to be honest, and this is where having the evidence comes in. It's honest only if you can prove it, and truthful. And you have to have, and these are their words, adequate and appropriate evidence to support claims, and that's where we support brands. So if you're trying to make a big claim on television, you're going to need a lot more evidence than if you're just making an online claim. And it's about the appropriate levels of evidence that you might need. Of course, the EU cosmetics regulations also state that proof of the effect claimed, you must have evidence to support it. So you can't just say things because you believe your product will do this. You can't imply that products have characteristics or functions that they don't. So you can't suggest it might do these things without having evidence. One of the big areas we see problems with this is straying into medical claims. Treats eczema, treats acne. You can't say these things and you can't suggest it. And lots of spot and pimple products have got into trouble because they've tried to push it as close to the line. These are medical claims. And there's a common criteria for claims, which I'm not going to go into here. I do a whole lecture for the CTPA, which tells you what the levels of evidence should be, what is best practice, what the advertising regulators will accept. So what is a moisturization claim? What is an anti-wrinkle claim? What is a microbiome claim? What is menopause claim? What are the levels of evidence you're going to need to convince somebody that you can make that claim? So as I said, if you make a claim anywhere, where it's PAC, website, social, absolutely anywhere, you have to have data to support it. Couple of historical ones when companies like us didn't have a job. I mean, that's a great claim, isn't it? Wash away fat. I bet they shifted a few of those. Whether you sold 2 bars of soap that washed away fat is another question, just to make it more relevant today. And the same with a carbolic salve that sweeps away every unsightly spot. In today's regulations, every spot would be held up. Can you clear every spot? And that's a medical claim anyway, of course. That's not to say that companies don't make claims which aren't credible, and this is where the credibility bit in my title comes. So there's a claim here which you might not be able to read from the back of the room, which says moisturization increased by 1,000%. Now, we measure moisturization every week in the clinic, and we've tested people with extremely dry skin. We've tested these winter formulations that have got 50% glycerol in. The only way you could get 1,000% increase is if you drown somebody. And I think even that, I mean, it's just not credible, this kind of claim. And this is the kind of thing where people then have a pop at the industry, because if somebody complained about that, there's no way they've got credible data that supports that. And there's every other claim about that is dubious. So again, social media will kill you if you're making crazy claims these days, and you need to be thinking about what is your brand integrity, what's it worth, and question the data you've got, either from a supplier or a company like ourselves. That is this real? Can we really say 1,000%? I'm guessing you'll have got the answer to this before I read this list out, but I just want to pick some of these. So which of these are cosmetic claims? The product and the ingredient action, the ingredient benefits, what it contains or what it doesn't contain, silicone-free, for instance, how you use it, comparing it to another product, testimonials, which is a good one. So if you've got somebody who's using your skin cream and they say it's cleared mine and little Johnny's eczema up in 3 days, and you put a picture on your website and testimonial, you think, great, they said it, we didn't say it. That doesn't wash, because that's a medical claim and you haven't got evidence to support it, and that happens a lot as well. Testimonials have to be supported by representative amounts of evidence for the claim that you're making. One person telling you it's a wonder product is not allowed. And then the rest of the list there: who should use it, how it's been tested, trademark, patent, so on. Endorsements, so whether it's an Instagram influencer, whether it's a doctor, that's a claim. Who recommends it, even a picture of the pack is a claim, and a picture of somebody using it is a claim. All these things are claims, and if you get it wrong, you can be challenged. If you get it right, you can get your message across really powerfully. But as well as the sort of, as I said, you know, the regulations and the do's and don'ts, there's also, what do you want to get out of it? How do you want to represent your product? A lot of the time we really do settle for underwhelming for products. We just go for ingredient claims. So the supplier says that if we include this, we can say helps to, known to, supposed to, you know, these sorts of claims. Or you just want to do a standard test and get a standard claim like moisturization because you think you need it. Or you want to be the same as brand X. You started because they're doing great in the market and they're saying that, so we need to say that. Well, then you're still not going to be comparable to them because they're the ones who got the first move on that. Why do you want to say the same as them? Why don't you want to position your product differently? And so taking the easiest path to achieving pack and copy claim and having no clear message or direction are real issues in the development process. The way we like to work is when people come to talk to us about testing is to say, what are you going to say on pack, on advertise? What are the exact words? So don't get the data and then decide what you're going to say about it. Because a single word can change a claim. It can either invalidate all the testing you've done. So, the technical people have said, we need to do this testing. The marketing people have said, we want to make this claim. That's not what the data said. Well, why didn't we do that test? We need to, if you get it aligned at the beginning and get it right, you'll get much better value. An example of how a word can change it is suitable for eczema-prone skin, suitable for treating eczema-prone skin. The second one is a medical claim, and you can't say it. And it's just a single word. So if you just slip a word into a bit of marketing copy, you can invalidate everything that you've actually got and give yourself a problem. So try and agree that at the beginning before you start spending money on this stuff. And so really, are you just another vanilla, or do you want to say something a bit more interesting about your brand and stand out a little bit and make people want to pay a bit more and see what you're doing and have a stronger position in the market than the guy next to you and have more shelf space in Boots or Superdrug? So that's kind of the background to claims. So how do you then go about supporting them? And there are loads of options. So I can't tell you how to support a claim here today because there's rarely a simple relationship between a claim and a test. As I said, one word can change how you need to position that product, and it can be the difference between it being a strong claim, being a weak claim, being an illegal claim. So the things that you need to consider are, how many people do you need to make that claim statistically? I'll talk about user trialing in a minute. We run lots and lots of user studies for companies. You need a minimum of 50 people on a study. The ASA requires you to have at least 50 to be representative. Trying to do consumer studies on 20 people, one person is a huge percentage change in your numbers. It's meaningless. It doesn't represent the average consumer. So for consumer data, more is better. Is it statistically relevant? So if we're doing clinical testing on moisturization, just because one bar is bigger than the other bar doesn't mean that you've got an effect. It's whether it statistically can be supported to say that that's the case. You've got to have the right demographics and physiological conditions. Is it a dry skin brand? Are you targeting people with pigmentation? Are you targeting people with a tendency to blemishes and spots? Is the product tested appropriately? Is it just one test, or do you need a whole body of evidence? For some things, if you just want to say all-day moisturization, we can run a moisturization test. If you want to say people felt their skin was moisturized all day, you probably want to run a user study as well to get the consumer experience to support. Technically, it does this, and people notice it. And if you're making a big, new, bold claim, and we're all talking about microbiome at the moment, as I say, if you look at Dove, you're going to need a stack of data like that because it's new. And you need to provide the evidence that this is real to the advertising authorities. So you need a body of evidence. And is it instrumental or consumer or both? And the example I just gave of moisturizing, it could be either way of doing it depending on what you want to say, or it could be both. So obviously, I'm going to say, work with a CRO or somebody who can help you navigate this and get the most effective route through. You can waste a lot of money on claims testing by just getting it wrong, and you start to think, well, why are we doing this? This isn't for us. Give them. There we go. I mentioned user trialing. It's sometimes looked at as kind of a poor person's version of claims testing, but actually it's really powerful because it's one of the ways that you get the consumer experience of the product. So we can measure moisturization, we can measure changes in lines and wrinkles in the clinic, and I'll talk about clinical trials next. But does anybody experience that? When they use that, do they really feel that benefit of the product? Does the product smell awful? You know, might be the best moisturizer we've tested in 20 years, but if it smells awful, nobody will buy it once and definitely not twice. And you get all this kind of information from consumer testing. So it's really valuable, but you've got to do it right. The questions have got to be asked in the appropriate way, so that they're open. You're not guiding people. You need to use blinded products so they're not Googling to see that, wow, this is 80 quid at retail. You know, I'm going to love it. You've got to do everything right for this, but you get some really valuable information. And things like, you know, 95% would recommend to a friend is great if you're pitching to a retailer and things like this, because it shows that people want to buy it. So you can ask a lot of different things and learn a lot about your product. We do a lot of user trialing through our Q Consumer business. Some things you can only do with consumer testing. And then some things you can only do through clinical trials, of course. So if you want quantitative changes and you want the highest standard of testing for certain things, then you've got to do a clinical study. So for instance, if you want to say reduces wrinkles by 20% in 2 weeks, you have to measure that, because the consumer can't tell you that my wrinkles are 30% less than when I started 4 weeks ago. You simply cannot get that kind of quantitative information from a user study, because nobody can remember. You can barely remember what you looked like 4 weeks ago. You certainly couldn't talk about a percentage change. The other thing about clinical trials is you can measure multiple endpoints. So it's not just a moisturization study. You can also be looking at redness, skin radiance, wrinkles, pigmentation, microbiome. We're doing a lot of sampling of bugs off skin at the moment for people to see whether products are protecting the microbiome with regular use, for instance. And you can get lovely images like these 3D scans of lip volume or wrinkle depth and things like this. The picture of the Vizier at the top was one that's featured on a TV advert earlier in the year. So companies are making value out of the fact that they've done testing. One that I can share with you, because it's in the public domain, obviously I can't talk about clients, is Ingenious Beauty, and this is a collagen supplement. We're on their website, so I can share it with you. It's public domain. This is a brand that went from having no products to now having a huge turnover in 2 years. I've done, I don't know how many radio interviews on their behalf. I've done a BBC piece for them. I've got another interview coming up to talk about the clinical study again in a few weeks with another media outlet. And the reason is they ran a clinical study, double-blind, placebo-controlled, and got really good results. And it's on their website, so you can see the results. But that's the power of claims and how they've used that and leveraged it to grow really quickly and outgrow the collagen market, which, as we all know, is a little bit crowded. So they've got in there with a high-end approach, which is we're going to prove ours works, and everybody else has got to, you know, shows your evidence, and it's working because they're generating tons of PR and publicity because people are interested in the story. So you've maybe you've bought into the fact that maybe I want to do some testing. This makes a bit of sense. So you need to have a relationship with the company that's going to do the testing for you. Does it understand what you want? Are you L'Oreal, or are you just making your first product? Because how you approach it is going to be very different. Do the staff understand what you're trying to do? Can they build on your request? Can they suggest something better? Have they got the experience, or are they just saying, yeah, we run moisturization, it's that much, we run patch tests, it's that much? Or are they working with you to help you say something about your product? And importantly, you've probably sat through a number of talks today. We've talked about environmental issues, you've talked about sustainability, you've talked about sourcing, you've talked about your packaging. Is your testing part of your CSR and brand ethics? Because for me, it's really important. And I'll give you an example of why. This is patch testing, but this is not patch testing as we do it. This is patch testing as you can get done for a couple of €100 somewhere in Eastern Europe or elsewhere, where they absolutely cover volunteers in products. Is it ethical to treat people like this? And also, if you see on the bottom picture where there's a big nasty reaction, which does happen on products, that has spilled across at least 3 or 4 different products. So if you were next to whatever product that is, your data's invalidated. Whose fault is that? Who pays for that test? What happens if that volunteer has a massive reaction to one of those products? Because that does happen, particularly if they're not particularly scrupulous about what products they're testing. They're just taking any old rubbish and sticking it on people's skin. Then people can have anaphylactic reactions. So if you're racing to the bottom to save a few quid, why aren't you racing to the bottom on your packaging and your sustainability and everything else? So obviously I'm really passionate about how people test things on other people. These are real people like you and me, and you wouldn't want to put something dangerous on yourself. So think about it in terms of the ethics of what you as a brand stand for, and therefore what you would be prepared for other people to do. But then, just a couple of examples of what you can do with claims. So one of the things is loads of visual data, which is great for marketing, it's great for collateral, it's great for sharing. So these are Visier images, so you get absolutely rock solid before and after images. We've all seen the terrible before and afters where the lighting angle changes and they've got makeup on and, you know, all sorts of, and this just doesn't wash in this day and age. But you can get really rock solid data, and also you can get quantitation on things like spots and wrinkles and skin texture and pores. You can get a lot out of a single Visier image these days. A lot of data. I talked about moisturization. So of course with clinical testing you can support quantitative claims like moisturizes for 24 hours, moisturizes all day, and you can compare against competitors. And you can see here that compared to the untreated control, the little blue bar at 24 hours and at 8 hours is still significantly higher, so statistically significant. So that's how you support that claim. Not just it looks higher, but it is statistically higher. And that was tested on 30 people because we know the variability. Everybody's skin is different, and we know you need about that many on the study. A really powerful way of supporting advertising claims is through expert clinical grading. Because if you can describe a visible change, that puts you very firmly within the cosmetics regulations, which is changing the appearance temporarily of skin. Keeps you out of medical claims, but is also really positive for the consumer, which is if somebody can see a change in wrinkles, then I might see a change in wrinkles. If somebody can see a change in dryness, I might see a change in dryness. And so it's a visible cosmetic change. And so we have trained nurses and technical staff who can score wrinkle depth on a photographic scale, and they can keep comparing blind and look at whether you get a change. And we have scales for dryness, for redness, for things which can be measured. And it's really accurate. And the example with the orangey bars and the blue bars is crow's foot wrinkles. And this was a really interesting example. So this was a large retailer of products, their own brand, and they were reformulating. Blue was the reformulation, orange was the one they were already selling. As you can see, the old one was better than the new one. So they had to have a rethink. So that teaches you things sometimes when you're doing this. And the one on the right with the blue and the red bars is a dry heel study, which our staff always love doing, as you can imagine. People coming in with horrible, crusty, dry feet. But you got to prove the claims on those as well. And that shows that you got really good resolution of dryness using this product compared to the untreated other foot in this case. And then linked to this, something we do quite a lot of, again, because if you can see it, then it's a really good thing to communicate. And one is about blind assessment of images. So we collect a lot of images through studies, and then we randomly present, say, the start and the end picture to people, either groups of members of the public or expert staff, and say, can you tell the difference? Because if you can see the difference, then you know that the product is having a benefit. And then finally, hair claims. Don't forget you can do lots of interesting things with hair products now. You've got hair colour fade there in the top left. You've got hair shine. Down the bottom was we're looking at whether bond builder products actually repair bonds. Oh, what have we done? Sorry, I was trying to go backwards. Whether bond builder products actually repair bonds. Guess what? Some do, some don't. And pollution effects on hair, so cigarette smoke, ozone, hard water, and the like. So there's lots you can do. And I keep pressing the wrong button. I'd just like to finish, I know I've run out of time at this stage, is just to say, have a vision of where your brand is going to be with what you want to say about it and how you want to share that, and integrate the technical and the marketing to every aspect of the studies. And don't just succumb to box ticking. Really think this through. I don't want to overstay my welcome, so thank you.